The rain had just stopped when the search team noticed it. A faint reflection on the tree's damp bark caught someone's eye. Not from something metallic or artificial, but from something carved and still fresh. The bark had been deliberately stripped in clean, careful strokes, as if someone had spent time making sure each line would be seen clearly, even under layers of moss and moisture. The carved numbers didn't look random. 2.31 556 degram, 69.84667 degram, followed by a single letter beneath them, J. For a moment, no one spoke. It was quiet, too quiet for that part of the jungle. The heat pressed down. Like a warning, one of the searchers, Marco, stepped closer and ran his fingers across the numbers. The wood was still damp, but the inside layers had started to dry. It couldn't be more than a few days old. He looked back at the others, his voice low. This wasn't here before. Jason didn't blink. He had memorized those coordinates within seconds, even before someone could write them down. It had been 9 weeks since his wife Emily and their 12-year-old daughter Lily had vanished somewhere in the heart of the Amazon. 9 weeks since anyone had heard from them. 9 weeks of hearing. Phrases like no leads, dense terrain, likely succumbed to the elements. But Jason never believed they were gone, not without a trace. Emily was cautious, deliberate, and Lily was sharp, far too sharp to wander aimlessly. Jason had begged officials to keep the search going, but they'd pulled back weeks ago. Still, he stayed. He hired private help, combed satellite imagery, traced rumors, and now there was something. A message, a sign, coordinates, and a letter. J. That's how Lily signed all her school notebooks. That's how she ended every birthday card. It was her, the team, gathered around the tree in a tight semicircle, eyes scanning the jungle for signs of movement, of anything out of place. They weren't deep into the wilderness yet, but the air felt wrong, charged. Jason crouched down near the tree base, brushing aside dead leaves and damp vines, looking for anything else. A footprint, a scrap of cloth, nothing. Just the coordinates and the J staring back like an invitation or a warning. He pulled out his GPS and punched in the numbers. The location wasn't far, just 3 miles west, but the terrain on the map showed steep inclines, dense canopy, and a section known locally as the Hollow Path, a place guides refused to enter without extra pay. Jason turned to the group. We go now. One of the men hesitated. It's almost dark. Jason's jaw tightened. We go now. As they moved, Jason's mind raced. Why carve a message and not keep moving? Was it a trap? Was she trying to slow him down, or had something happened that forced them to stop? He hated the possibilities that crawled into his brain like leeches. Emily injured, Lily alone, or worse. He pushed those thoughts down. Emily knew what she was doing. She had survival training. They'd planned for this trip for months. It was supposed to be educational, an eco-tour through the Amazon basin, guided by a trusted friend of a friend. Jason hadn't gone because of work, a decision he now regretted more than anything. That single choice, that moment of, I'll catch up later, haunted every step he took now. Maybe if he'd been there, they wouldn't have vanished. Maybe this tree wouldn't be whispering coordinates in the middle of nowhere. The jungle grew thicker as they advanced. The daylight dimmed fast under the canopy, every step sinking into wet soil and twisted roots. Insects buzzed like distant static, and somewhere far off a monkey screamed once, then went silent. Jason's thoughts circled one image, the last photo Emily had sent. Her and Lily on a small boat, orange life vests, smiles wide and real. Behind them, a man in a blue cap, supposedly the guide. Jason had looked at that photo 100 times. The guide hadn't said much when questioned. He claimed he'd dropped them off safely at a nearby station. The station confirmed seeing them, but then nothing. No departure, no records, no sightings. Just gone. Jason didn't buy it. And now, this carved tree made it clear someone was still out there, and someone wanted to be found. By the time they reached a clearing, Jason's shirt was soaked with sweat, and the GPS showed they were only a mile away from the destination. The The coordinates led to a small elevation ahead, barely visible through the thick mist. But that was rolling in like smoke. The team paused, checking gear, drinking water, tightening laces. Jason didn't pause. He pushed forward, brushing branches aside with urgency, not bothering to avoid the thorns. He could feel it. He didn't know how, but he felt it. They were close. Every time he blinked, he saw that J, that small mark on a tree. It didn't belong there by chance. It meant Lily had been alive. At least, she was alive when she carved it or when Emily did it for her. Jason tripped, catching himself against a tree trunk. His fingers dug into the bark and found something strange. Another mark, faint, almost erased, a straight line, then another. He scraped away the moss. An old mark, faded numbers. It wasn't the first message. This one was older, months, years. The jungle was full of things no one ever saw. His heart pounded harder. Maybe other people had left. Signs. Maybe his family wasn't the first to disappear. He turned to Marco. Has anyone else reported carvings like this? Marco shook his head. Not here. Not like that. But there are stories. Jason didn't want stories. He wanted his family. Night fell faster than expected. The last stretch to the coordinates would need to wait. The team set up camp, a small fire barely keeping the chill and bugs away. Jason sat apart, staring at the GPS, at the numbers glowing on the screen. 2.3156 degree 1, 69.8467 degree W. He whispered them aloud like a prayer. He looked at the photo of Emily again. Her smile. The little dimple only Lily shared. Then the J carved into the tree, replayed in his mind like a drumbeat. Was it a breadcrumb, a trap, a goodbye? He didn't know. But tomorrow, at first light, he would find out. Jason hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since the day he got the call. It was supposed to be routine, a check-in message that never came. The first night, he thought they just lost signal. By the second, he was refreshing weather maps, convincing himself they were waiting out a storm. On the third day, when their satellite phone still didn't ping, and when the lodge they were scheduled to return to reported they hadn't arrived, the panic began. He spent hours calling embassies, consulates, jungle tour companies. Nobody had answers. Everyone said the same thing. Wait, they'll turn up. But Emily wouldn't go dark like that. Not with Lily, not unless something had gone wrong. Deep down, Jason knew it from day one. He just didn't want to say it out loud. He tried to stay rational. Emily was smart, prepared. She had experience with remote travel. She double-checked gear. She had packed extra power banks, emergency GPS beacons, and even flare guns. Jason remembered teasing her for being overcautious. Now, he clung to that trait like it was the last thread of hope. He called the company that had arranged the river trip. They didn't pick up. When he finally got through to someone 3 days later, the answers were vague. The boatman's story was inconsistent. First, he claimed he dropped them off near a research station. Then he said they changed course and insisted on going further upriver. Jason pressed for names, locations, timestamps, anything. But the man's phone disconnected and no one could reach him again. Jason booked the first flight out. Within 48 hours, he was in Brazil, retracing steps from airports to riverbanks, holding a photo of his wife and daughter like a lifeline. The officials were polite at first. They offered translators, basic resources, an investigator, but it didn't take long for them to grow cold. The jungle is vast. People get lost. Sometimes they don't come back. It wasn't personal. It was statistical. Jason could hear the fatigue in their voices like they'd said it all before. We'll search the main trail. It's unlikely they went far. We don't recommend civilians enter restricted areas. None of it mattered to Jason. He wanted results, not caution. He offered money, volunteers, his own assistance. He begged. Then he yelled. Eventually they stopped returning his calls altogether. That's when he knew. If he wanted, Answers, he would have to get them himself. He sold his car, cleared out his savings, hired 2 local guides who had worked in the area for years, men who didn't ask questions, just packed their gear and followed his instructions. The jungle didn't intimidate Jason. What scared him was silence, the Zoom kind of silence that follows when too much time has passed and people start using past tense about someone you love. He fought that with every ounce of himself. Every day he reviewed satellite maps, scanned social media posts from tourists who had been in the region, emailed researchers who worked nearby. He even contacted ex-military jungle specialists online, asking for survival insights. He wasn't looking for theories. He was looking for a sliver of something, a footprint, a misplaced item, a clue that screamed, they were here. The hardest part was Lily. At night, in the tent or in the back of a boat, Jason would open her last voice message. "Hi, Dad. We're okay. Mom says this river is magical. Wish you were here." Then a laugh, then silence. He listened to it over and over again. He kept hearing new things. An echo, a splash, a faint sound in the background. He sent the clip to audio specialists. No one found anything unusual, but to Jason it felt unfinished, like she wanted to say more but couldn't. Every decision he made was for her. Every step forward was a refusal to let that laughter become a memory. Emily would have done the same for him. He knew that. She never gave up on anything. Neither would he. Rumors started surfacing as he moved deeper into the jungle communities. Someone had seen 2 women matching their description weeks ago. Someone else mentioned hearing a scream near the cliffs west of the river. Most of the rumors were useless, half-truths from people who wanted money or just attention. But one thing stayed consistent, a fear in people's eyes when he mentioned the area they had disappeared in. No one wanted to talk about that part of the jungle. Some just shook their heads. Others whispered about strange sounds, figures moving at night, people who went in and never returned. Jason didn't believe in legends. He believed in people, and someone out there knew something. He could feel it. On the 31st day of his search, Jason found an old woman who worked at a supply station near the river bend. When he showed her the photo, she went pale. She said the mother had asked for batteries. The girl had smiled at her. They were polite. Then she said something strange. The boatman didn't want to take them there. He argued, but she insisted, said she'd done her research. Jason asked if she remembered anything else. The woman only said, "They were not alone." Those words stuck in his mind like barbed wire. He pressed for more, but she refused, said it was cursed land, said the forest had taken others too. Jason left, but her words burned into him. What did she mean by not alone? Jason stopped shaving, stopped keeping track of days. He wore the same clothes until they tore, then replaced them with local gear. He started dreaming in Portuguese, half remembering sentences from overheard conversations. The jungle had become a part of him. He didn't care anymore about comfort or sleep. Only distance covered, only clues. Then came the day when Marco, his main guide, called him over silently. That was when they found the tree, the coordinates, the letter J. Jason had gone from desperation to something else. Conviction. He wasn't crazy. They had left a sign. They were alive, or had been. That was enough. That night, Jason stared at the tree until everyone else had gone to sleep. He traced the numbers over and over again, memorizing the shape, the feel of the cuts. He whispered his daughter's name under his breath. He let himself cry, quietly, briefly. Then he stopped. There was no time for emotion. Not yet. He had a new mission now. That tree wasn't the end. It was a beginning, and if the jungle wanted to test him, it had picked the wrong man. The video started with laughter. Jason had watched it so many times, the audio cues were burned into his memory. Emily holding the phone, Lily behind her, leaning over to wave at the camera, her grin so wide it stretched to her ears. "Hi, Dad," she had said, her voice echoing slightly in the open air. "We're on the river now. It's even better than we thought." Jason remembered pausing the frame at the moment Emily turned the camera around, showing the slow-moving current, the thick wall of green stretching endlessly on both sides. In the background, a man in a dark blue cap sat at the rear of the boat, his hands steady on the engine. Jason had stared at that man's face for hours, zooming, enhancing, trying to read something, anything, but there was nothing there. Just another day on the river, just another guide doing his job. At least, that's what it looked like then. Emily had always been the adventurous one. She believed in experiences, real ones, off the grid. Lily had inherited that curiosity, that refusal to settle for surface-level answers. Their trip to Brazil had started with organized lodges and nature tours. But on their third day, Emily had messaged Jason saying she wanted to take a short detour to a less traveled area, a place a local had recommended as unforgettable. Jason had hesitated, but she'd reassured him. It wasn't far, the guide knew the area, and they'd be back within 2 days. That was the last time he'd heard her voice. In hindsight, there was something off in the message. Not the words, but her eyes, like she was trying not to show concern, like she was already second-guessing, but didn't want to say it. Jason hadn't noticed it then, but now it screamed at him. The day before they vanished, Emily had sent one last set of pictures. Jason remembered every detail. The boat, the smiles, the sky perfectly clear, Lily wearing her orange life vest, holding a notebook on her lap. That notebook was always with her. She used it to sketch animals, jot down observations, even write silly poems. Jason had found a few of them once, written in messy cursive, full of hearts and stars. In one photo, she was drawing something. Jason had tried zooming in, but the image was too blurry. He would give anything to know what she was sketching in that moment. It felt important, like a hidden message no one saw coming. But there were no answers. In pixels, just questions that dug deeper the more he stared. The lodge confirmed they had checked out that morning. They took minimal gear, day packs, cameras, snacks. Emily had left a note with the front desk. Gone upriver with trusted guide. Back by nightfall or tomorrow latest. Room paid in. Full. It was so typical of her, detailed, clear, polite. But the handwriting, Jason noticed it looked rushed. Letters slanted more than usual. Not the kind of thing most people would pick up on. But Jason knew her writing better than anyone. That note had an edge to it, a tension, and yet no one at the lodge found it suspicious. She seemed happy, the clerk had said. The little girl waved at everyone. Jason kept coming back to that moment. Something had shifted between checkout and the disappearance. Something invisible to everyone, but present all along. The guide's name was Rafael Mendes. At least that's the name he used. No formal records existed under it, no licensing. Jason had gone back to the lodge, to the marina, to local registry offices. Nothing. He didn't exist on paper. Emily had trusted him because someone vouched for him. A biologist they met on day 2. Jason tracked that man down too. He claimed he barely knew Rafael, just heard he was reliable. When Jason pressed harder, the man clammed up. Look, he'd said, the jungle has rules. Some places you go, some places you don't. Maybe she pushed too far. That sentence echoed in Jason's head for weeks. Maybe she pushed too far. But it wasn't Emily's fault. She had asked questions. Someone had given bad answers. Jason had traced their intended route using GPS markers and travel estimates. If the river current was slow and the weather held, they should have reached a small outpost near the edge of the Tapajos Reserve by nightfall, but they never did. No one there remembered seeing them. No boats matched the description, no log entries, no photos, just absence. It was as if the river swallowed them whole. Jason paid divers to explore key bends. He hired drones. He even tried infrared scans. Nothing, not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint, not even a dropped snack wrapper. Emily had trained Lily to leave a trail if something went wrong, but there was no trail. Only that single carved tree, weeks later. Jason wondered if she had tried, if maybe she wasn't given the chance. There was one, Detail Jason couldn't shake. In one of the last photos, behind Emily, past the boat's motor, there was another boat, just a blur, partially hidden by the trees. At first, Jason thought it was a trick of light, but with enhancements, it became clear. A dark shape, possibly another person, possibly following. No one had mentioned another boat. No one recalled seeing it. Jason showed the image to locals, to investigators. Most dismissed it, but one man, a fisherman who knew the river well, grew quiet when he saw it. "That bend," he said. "People say it's cursed. You don't go beyond it. Not alone." Jason pressed him for more, but he shook his head. "Whatever's past there, people don't talk." Jason had always thought he'd be there for everything. First dates, graduations, even the hard stuff like heartbreaks and failures. But now, all he wanted was to know if Lily had eaten that day. If Emily had been scared, if they were cold. He hated his own mind for imagining the worst, for picturing things he couldn't unsee. He tried to focus on their last smiles, their laughter, their certainty. But dread was a heavy thing. It clung to memory like a shadow. Still, he refused to let that be their ending. Somewhere in those final normal moments, Jason believed there was a clue, a crack, a sign. He just had to find it. The hardest part was seeing how happy they had been. That day, they looked like everything was perfect. The water, the sunshine, the freedom. It was supposed to be a celebration of learning, of family, of life. That was the contrast that broke Jason. That was what made the silence that followed unbearable. Because now he knew the truth. The world can shift in a second. One decision, one turn down the wrong path, one smile before a storm, and no one ever sees it. Coming, Jason returned to the marina where the boat had departed. It looked unchanged, the same crooked dock, the same rusted fuel barrels, even the same dog lying under the bench. But this time, he wasn't just passing through, he was looking, really looking. Details mattered now. The first thing he noticed was the logbook. It hadn't been updated in weeks. The dock manager shrugged. Nobody really keeps track unless it's official business. Jason flipped through the pages anyway. His hand stopped when he reached the date Emily and Lily had supposedly left. Nothing was written. No departure time. No boat registration. No signatures. Just a blank space where a record should have been. It wasn't proof, but it was absence. And absence in this case felt intentional. He walked the path Emily would have taken with Lily. Locals remembered them. Of course they did. Blonde lady, polite. The girl smiled a lot. One vendor said Lily had pointed at the fish tanks and asked if they could pet the stingrays. Jason smiled at that. It sounded like her. Then he asked if anyone remembered who took them out. That's when the faces changed. People turned vague. Some shrugged. Some said, maybe Raphael, but no one confirmed. Finally, one man admitted something strange. She asked questions, a lot, about the North Banks, about abandoned research camps. Jason felt his chest tighten. Emily had always been curious, but this wasn't casual interest. She was digging for something, and the wrong people might have noticed. He found a boy, maybe 13, who worked helping tourists with bags. When Jason showed him the photo of Raphael, the boy looked down. "He doesn't take people anymore," he muttered. Jason pressed him. "Why not?" The boy hesitated. He said he was scared, that the woman brought bad luck. Jason froze. "He said that?" The boy nodded. "Said the forest didn't like her questions." It sounded ridiculous, mythical even. But Jason had learned that in places like this, fear often covered truth. He tried to get more out of the kid, but an older man shouted at him from across the dock, and the boy ran off. Jason stood there, heart pounding. The forest didn't like her questions. What did that even mean? Later, while retracing the edge of the market near the docks, Jason noticed something odd on a notice board. A missing persons flyer, weather-worn and sun-bleached. But the date caught his attention, April 12th, 2 years ago. Same departure point, same type of boat, a different woman and her teenage son, never found. The details were eerily similar. Last seen heading upriver with an unlicensed guide. Jason snapped a photo and took it with him, back at the small inn where he was. Staying, he pinned the photo next to Emily's. 2 faces, different people, same route, same vanishing. It couldn't be coincidence. He called the local police station, but the report had been closed after 40 days. No leads. Case abandoned. Jason made a note. Same pattern, same silence. Back on the dock the next day, Jason found another piece. A woman running a juice stand said Emily had asked her about an old research post with satellite signal. That caught Jason off guard. He didn't remember Emily mentioning that. She had a notebook, the woman added. Wrote everything down. Didn't act. Like a tourist. Jason asked what else Emily had said. The woman thought hard. She asked if the river had ever changed course. Jason blinked. That was a strange question. But in the Amazon, rivers did shift. Entire paths changed over time. He thanked the woman and walked off, mind racing. Emily wasn't sightseeing. She was looking for something, or someone. That night, Jason laid out everything on the floor of his room. Maps, notes, interviews. He drew a line through Emily's movements. Then he circled every small moment, every comment dismissed by others. A missing signature, a nervous dock worker, the kid who said Raphael was scared, a tourist missing 2 years earlier. None of it screamed crime or danger on its own, but together they formed a shape, a pattern, a gut-level certainty that Emily had noticed something she wasn't supposed to, and that someone made sure she didn't. Talk about it again. Jason began noticing smaller things too, like how everyone said Lily was cheerful, but no one remembered her talking much. It was always Emily, always the mother asking. Jason remembered how, when Lily got nervous, she became quiet, observant. She watched people. She noticed everything. Jason wondered if she'd seen something, someone off, if she'd tried to warn her mom, but he had no way to know. No voice message, no drawing, just that carved J in the tree, a voice from the silence. The next morning, Jason returned to the path where the boat had likely launched. There was something there he couldn't shake. He asked one of the fishermen if the boats were ever tracked via GPS. The man laughed. Only if they want to be found. Jason didn't laugh. He asked if the police ever checked phones for signal traces. The man shrugged. They don't care about phones, they care about crime. No crime, no case. Jason felt that familiar burn in his chest, frustration wrapped in helplessness. That was the core of his battle, not just against time, but against indifference. Before leaving, Jason sat on the same bench where Emily and Lily had likely waited before boarding. He closed his eyes and tried to feel it, to imagine what they felt. Excitement, curiosity, caution. He pictured Lily looking up at the trees, wondering if there were monkeys or sloths. He imagined Emily checking her watch, writing something down in her notebook. That notebook. If he could just find it. Maybe he'd have answers. Maybe she left a trail in ink when she couldn't leave one in footsteps. Jason whispered to himself, "You knew something. You saw something." He opened his eyes. The jungle stared back, quiet, dense, watching. Jason wasn't the kind of man to wait for permission. By the 5th week, it was clear that the authorities had moved on. The initial search was brief. 2 helicopters, a short-range drone, and 3 days of ground patrol, limited to tourist-friendly areas. It had been a formality more than a rescue. Jason knew if he wanted real answers, he had to act on his own. With what little money he had left, he contracted a local tracker named Luis, a man with rough hands, eyes that never blinked, and a reputation for going where others wouldn't. Alongside him came 2 younger men, cousins, both quiet, both strong. They didn't ask questions. Jason preferred it that way. They launched at dawn from the same dock Emily had. The river was calm, the air thick with fog, and the only sound was the boat engine churning through brown water. Jason sat at the front, scanning the trees like a soldier entering enemy territory. He had marked every location Emily had referenced on her maps and notes, every place she might have gone. The first 2 hours passed in silence. Then Luis cut the engine and drifted. "Here," he said, pointing to a narrow inlet, almost invisible behind reeds. "This isn't on the official." "On the map," Jason said. Luis nodded. "But it's where the locals say your wife wanted to go." Jason's pulse quickened. They turned in, ducking under low branches as the sun broke through the canopy. On land, it was harder. The jungle floor was deceptive. Mud disguised as stability, vines like tripwires. They walked in silence, ears trained for movement, eyes scanning for disturbances. Jason had memorized every detail from the photos: Lily's notebook, Emily's red backpack, the pattern on her shoes. Then, just an hour in, Luis stopped and crouched. Jason's heart leapt. Luis pointed to a small patch of earth near the root of a thick fig tree. Embedded in the mud was a bright yellow hair tie. Jason froze. It was Lily's. He dropped to his knees and picked it up gently, as if it would crumble. It was soaked, covered in dirt, but intact. He knew it was hers. Emily braided Lily's hair every morning and used only those, yellow, always yellow. Jason felt a flash of hope, quickly swallowed by dread. If it was here, they had been here. But when? He pulled out his phone and marked the GPS location. "We need to go deeper," he said, his voice sharp. Luis hesitated. If they dropped that here, they could be miles away by now. Jason didn't care. It was a sign, proof. He reached for the radio and called the nearest station. "I found something," he told them. "A child's item. Coordinates are incoming." The voice on the other end was flat. "We'll log it." Jason waited. "That's it? You're not sending anyone?" There was silence. Then, "There's no active search order. We recommend you return to a safe area." Jason stared at the radio, hands shaking. He threw it to the ground. "They're still out there," he shouted, but the jungle swallowed his voice. They camped nearby that night. Jason didn't sleep. He sat with the hair tie in his hand, wondering how far a child could walk in terrain like this. He thought about how Emily would react, calm at first, logical, then fierce. She would have protected Lily with her life. Jason knew she was still doing that somewhere. The next morning, they pressed deeper, following any sign. Broken branches, disturbed moss, oddly spaced rocks, but each trail led nowhere. The jungle covered everything like a blanket of denial. Jason refused to believe it was over, not after finding something so personal. But Luis was starting to look different, less confident, more cautious. Jason saw it in his eyes. By the end of the third day, they found nothing more. No clothes, no gear, no drawings, just jungle. Jason sat on a boulder, staring at the trees, sweat pouring from his face. "It was here," he muttered. "They were here." Luis looked at him, then looked away. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "people leave signs that never lead anywhere." Jason stood up. This isn't that. But a small part of him wondered if it was. If the jungle was playing tricks on him, offering glimpses of hope just to smother them. He shook the thought away. He had to keep moving. The trail wasn't cold, it was hidden. That was different. They returned to the dock days later, sunburned, exhausted, and empty-handed. Jason handed over the hair tie to the local police as evidence. The officer barely looked at it. "Could belong to any child," he said. Jason felt his body. "Go cold. It's hers." The officer shrugged. "We'll file it. No report, no action, no urgency." Jason left the station feeling like he was losing not just his family, but the fight to be believed. It wasn't enough to care. You had to convince others to care too, and Jason was failing. That night, in his room, Jason sat on the floor, maps around him, the space littered with empty water bottles and scribbled notes. He stared at a printout of Lily's face and whispered, "I found your hair tie, baby. I know you left it. I know you want me to keep going." Then he thought of Emily. What would she do? Now, she'd analyze the path, she'd dig deeper, she wouldn't stop. Jason stood, grabbed a pen, and drew a new circle around the coordinates where he found the tie. Then he drew a second one, the spot with the tree carving. They weren't far apart, not far at all. That's when it clicked. The tie wasn't dropped. It was left, deliberately, like a breadcrumb, like a message. Jason didn't know how, but he was certain now. Someone had tried to help him find the path, and someone else didn't want him to. The tree stood alone in the middle of an unnatural clearing, its bark still bleeding from the fresh carvings. Jason had seen thousands of trees in the Amazon, but this one was different. The clearing around it was too perfect, too symmetrical, like it had been shaped intentionally. He approached. Slowly, the sun slicing through the canopy above, casting thin golden beams across the letters etched into the wood. 2.3156 degree, 69 to 8467 degree, and just beneath it, a J. At first glance, it looked like a simple message, but Jason felt something deeper. The lines were too deliberate, too sharp. Whoever carved this wasn't rushed. They took their time. They wanted it to be seen. This was not panic. This was intention. Luis said nothing, standing back a few feet, eyes scanning the treetops. Jason didn't move. He stared at the letter. J. It was Lily. It had to be. Emily always encouraged her to leave markers during hikes. If you ever get lost, she'd said, leave signs for me. I'll find you. Jason swallowed hard. He ran his fingers across the grooves. The cuts weren't made with a knife. The lines were too wide. A machete, maybe. Jason turned to Luis. Could a child carve this? Luis shook his head. Maybe, if she was taught how, but not clean like this. Jason didn't know what was worse, that Lily might have done it under pressure, or that Emily had to carve it as a last resort. Either way, this was a cry, and it had reached him. Jason took several photos. Then he looked. Around the clearing, something felt staged, the way the underbrush had been pushed back, the absence of debris. Even the smell was different, cleaner, less wild, like the forest here had been disturbed and hadn't grown back yet. Then, behind the tree, something caught his eye. A flash of black in the dirt. He walked over and pulled it free. It was a camera. Compact, battered, lens cracked, strap tangled. He turned it over in his hands. It was waterproof, sealed. Emily always carried it for wildlife shots. Jason's chest tightened. This was theirs. This was real. He looked up. No one else said a word. Back at camp, Jason used a satellite battery pack to charge the camera. He didn't sleep. Every few minutes, he checked the indicator light. Still red. Finally, after 3 hours, it blinked green. He powered it on. The screen flickered, cracked down the middle but functional. The photo library. Toe opened, his hands trembled. The first few were familiar, river shots, birds, trees. Then came photos he hadn't seen. Emily frowning at a map, Lily pointing toward something in the woods, a blurry shape in the background, too vague to make out. Then a video. Jason tapped it. The screen showed Emily, whispering, the camera tilted in her lap. If you're seeing this, she said, voice strained, we got turned around. The guide left us. I think someone's watching us. The feed cut off after 12 seconds. Jason dropped the camera. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was real. The mood among the team changed instantly. Luis grew silent. The others avoided Jason's eyes. They had signed up for a tracking job, not this. Jason knew they were weighing their options. They respected the jungle, but they feared what it might be hiding. Jason didn't blame them, but he also didn't care. He had confirmation now. Emily and Lily were alive days, maybe even weeks after the disappearance. The guide had lied. Someone had followed them, and they had tried to leave messages. Jason retrieved the GPS. The coordinates carved into the tree pointed northwest, 3 more miles into deeper territory. He circled it on the map. That was his next move. The morning after the discovery, Jason tried to radio the authorities again. This time, he included images, the camera, the carvings, the video clip. The voice on the other end responded with protocol jargon and disclaimers. This is not an active investigation. We'll review the material. If evidence of a crime arises, jurisdictional protocols may be engaged. Jason nearly crushed the radio in his fist. He looked at Luis. They're not coming. Luis nodded once. We go alone. That moment was pivotal. Jason felt something shift in him. Not anger, not fear, but resolve. If the system wouldn't fight for his family, he would become the system. As they moved out, Jason kept replaying the video in his head. Emily had looked exhausted, but focused. Her voice was clear. She was planning for someone to find the footage. That meant she had time to prepare. That meant they weren't ambushed. They were being watched, controlled. Jason considered the implications. Whoever left them had a reason, and whoever followed them didn't want them dead, at least not immediately. That gap in time gave Jason hope, but it also meant his family might still be enduring something now, something slow, something deliberate. That idea haunted him. Half a mile past the tree, they found another disturbance. This time, a boot print. Jason dropped to one knee and examined it closely. Too large for Emily, too narrow for Lily. Fresh, maybe a day old. That meant someone else had been here, watching the same tree. Jason took a photo and marked the spot. Then he noticed the moss on a nearby rock had been scraped off, like someone had sat there. Luis signaled quietly. "Trail goes that way," he said, pointing northwest. Jason nodded. They didn't stop to rest. As night fell, they set camp just outside the next dense area. Jason sat with the camera in his hands, scrolling through the final images again. One frame stopped him cold. It showed Lily holding something, her notebook. She was writing, her face half lit by a fire. And in the corner of the frame, barely visible, stood a woman. Not Emily, not someone he recognized. Wearing dark clothing turned sideways, Jason zoomed in. The face was half obscured, but the posture was wrong, detached, as if she didn't belong there. Jason felt his breath catch. This wasn't just a disappearance anymore. It was a web, a pattern, a setup. They pushed into the northwest trail before sunrise. The jungle changed subtly here. The canopy grew denser, the vines more tangled, the silence deeper. It wasn't just nature anymore. It felt curated, like something had shaped this path for reasons unknown. Jason had learned to trust those feelings. Luis was more alert now, machete always in hand, every few steps pausing to scan the foliage. Jason kept the camera in his pocket, occasionally glancing at the photo of the strange woman who'd appeared behind Lily. That single frame had altered everything. Someone else had been with them, closer than anyone realized. And she wasn't mentioned by anyone, not even Emily in her recorded message. That absence was as loud as a scream. 2 hours in, they found a makeshift shelter, branches tied with old cords, leaves layered carefully for camouflage. It had been used recently, scorch marks from a fire, a half-buried food wrapper, and to Jason's horror, a child's sock. He didn't recognize it, but the size was right. Still, it could have belonged to anyone. He placed it in a plastic bag, hands trembling. "She could have been here," he whispered. Luis nodded grimly. Then something strange, scribbled. Along one of the wooden poles was a date, 5/14, the exact day Jason had arrived in Brazil. That wasn't a coincidence. Someone had marked it. Someone wanted to keep track of movement. But whose? Later that day, a storm rolled in, forcing them to take shelter under a rock overhang. While waiting, Luis spoke for the first time in hours. "You know, this isn't the first time someone's gone missing here," he said quietly. Jason looked at him. "You mean like Emily and Lily?" Luis nodded slowly. "Years back, a scientist, then a couple. They all took different paths, but one thing in common. They all asked questions. Same region, same silence afterward." Jason's blood ran cold. This wasn't about getting lost. It was about being silenced. He pressed Luis for more, but the man just stared into the rain. "You're not the first one to come looking," he added. "You're just the only one who didn't. Stop." That night they met someone unexpected. A woman named Carla, mid-30s, weathered by the sun, approached their fire cautiously, hands raised. "You're looking for them, aren't you?" she asked. Jason stood up instantly, his pulse spiking. "How do you know that?" Carla looked past him, eyes sad. "Because I've been looking too." She said her sister vanished 3 years ago in the same sector. No investigation, no search, just vanishing. And she had something else, evidence. She pulled a folded photo from her pack. It showed her sister beside the same woman from Jason's footage. The stranger in the shadows. Jason took the photo with shaking hands. "This isn't random," Carla whispered. "It's connected." Over a fire, Carla explained what she'd pieced together. There was a pattern. Disappearances spread across 3 years, always involving women, often with children, always asking the wrong people the wrong questions. She believed someone was using the forest as a trap, not supernatural, human, organized. She showed Jason her notes, maps, conversations with scared locals, some of whom described a woman who talks little and watches everything. Jason felt the pieces locking in. His family had walked into a pattern, and now that he was asking too many questions, he was inside it too. The next morning, the group followed Carla deeper into a region she called the Silence Belt, an area avoided even by hunters. She'd found remnants of campsites, personal items, and even an old ID badge from a biologist who vanished in 2021. Jason held the badge in his hand. It was weather-worn, the name barely visible, but it was real, more real than anything the authorities had ever given him. Carla said she believed there was a central zone, somewhere people were taken, held, or worse. Not a camp, she said, a system, maybe research, maybe worse, but whoever runs it doesn't leave witnesses. That day, they reached an old logging trail, barely visible beneath years of overgrowth. Luis said it hadn't been used in over a decade, but tire tracks suggested otherwise. Recent ones. Jason crouched, touched the tracks and stared into the distance, a place forgotten by the world, but still alive, still moving. He didn't know what they would find ahead, but now he understood this wasn't about one family. It was about all of them. The forest wasn't just swallowing people. Someone was feeding it. As they moved forward, Jason's mind reeled. Every unanswered call, every closed report, every missing flyer, it all fit now. Someone had built an invisible wall around this mystery, and Jason had finally found the cracks. He turned to Carla. "Why you? Why do you keep searching?" She looked at him, eyes tired. "Because someone has to. If we stop, they win." Jason nodded. He wasn't alone anymore. But that didn't make what lay ahead any less dangerous. That night, Jason sat beside the fire, staring at the photos. The hair tie, the sock, the shelter, the woman. He whispered Lily's name and promised her one thing. "I don't care how deep this goes. I will tear it all down to get you back." Luis sharpened his machete beside him. Carla cleaned a small pistol. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of what was coming. Ahead of them was the heart of the forest, and whatever had been taking people wasn't going to let them in without a fight. Jason couldn't sleep. The campfire had long since gone cold, but his thoughts burned hotter than ever. That image of the strange woman, now matched in Carla's photo, wouldn't leave his mind. Who was she? And how did she tie to Emily and Lily's disappearance? Every step forward had only revealed more. Lies, more gaps. But one detail, one forgotten thread, began tugging at him while the others rested. The guide, Rafael Mendez, the man who had taken Emily and Lily upriver and then vanished from the narrative. Jason had asked about him early on. The answers were vague, slippery, evasive. But now, with everything they'd discovered, he realized something. Rafael had never been properly questioned, not by the police, not by the lodge, and certainly not by Jason himself. That was about to change. At first light, Jason radioed a contact in Santarém, a fixer named Daniel, who had helped him during his first weeks in Brazil. Daniel was well connected and knew how to get things others couldn't. When Jason asked about Rafael Mendez again, Daniel hesitated. "I thought you let that go," he said. Jason's voice was firm. "I need to know where he is. Now." After a long pause, Daniel replied, "He's back in town, but he doesn't want to be found." Jason's chest tightened. "Then find him for me. Hours passed. Jason barely moved from his seat. Carla and Luis packed up camp, sensing something different in his posture. Focused, still, coiled like a spring. By afternoon, Daniel sent a message with coordinates and a time. "He'll talk, but only once. You'll have 10 minutes. Jason and Luis left Carla behind to maintain their cover. The meeting spot was a broken-down bus depot just outside a rural village. When they arrived, Raphael was already there, leaning against a rusted metal beam, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding his eyes. Jason's stomach turned. This man had last seen his wife and daughter, and yet he looked calm. Too calm. Jason approached, fists clenched. "Where did you leave them?" Raphael didn't flinch. "I took them where they asked. Nothing more." Jason stepped closer. And lied to the lodge. You said they changed the plan." Raphael smirked. "They did, but not in the way you think." Jason stared at him, heart hammering. "What do you mean?" Raphael looked around nervously, then lowered his voice. "They were asking questions about things they shouldn't. Locals warned me. I told her, but she didn't listen." Jason's throat tightened. "So you abandoned them?" Raphael shook his head. "I didn't abandon anyone. I left when they met someone else." Silence. Jason's hands trembled. "What someone?" Raphael looked up. "A woman, pale, spoke almost no Portuguese, said she was from a research group. Emily seemed to know her name. They left with her." Jason's mind reeled. "You didn't stop them?" Raphael laughed bitterly. "You don't stop people like that. You just stay out of their way." That confession shattered something in Jason. For weeks, he had assumed Emily and Lily had been lost, attacked or stalked, but now he saw it. Someone had been waiting, and Raphael had knowingly let them go. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Jason asked, his voice cracking. Raphael looked away. "Because I was paid not to." Jason froze. "Paid by who?" Raphael shrugged. "No name, just money. Enough to stay quiet, to say nothing, and that's what I did." Jason lunged forward, grabbing Raphael by the shirt. "You sold them out." Raphael didn't resist. "I saved myself. You'd have done the same." Jason wanted to scream. Instead, he let go. "You're wrong," he said. "I'd have warned them." They left. Raphael behind. Luis didn't speak, but Jason saw something new in his eyes, disgust. They rode back in silence. Jason replayed the conversation over and over. Emily had met someone willingly, someone she knew, or thought she knew. That changed the timeline. It meant her disappearance wasn't a sudden ambush. It was planned or orchestrated, maybe even baited. Jason's thoughts spiraled. Had she been researching something? Had she walked into something bigger? Or had she been manipulated from the start? Back at camp, Jason told Carla everything. She didn't look surprised. "I've heard about her," she said. "The quiet woman. They call her La Observadora. She shows up when people start asking the wrong questions. Then people vanish." Jason clenched his fists. "Then I'm going to find her." Carla nodded. "Be careful. People who chase her don't come back." Jason met her gaze. "She took my family. I'm not stopping." That night, Jason didn't sleep. He stared at the sky through the canopy, the stars hidden by clouds. He thought of Lily, of Emily, of all the moments he'd never get back. Then he made a silent vow. If there was a system behind this, he would break it. The next morning, Luis handed Jason a map, one that marked a zone deep in the jungle, far from all known paths. Locals call it the blind side. No animals, no birds, nothing. Jason looked at the markings. "That's where she went, isn't it?" Luis nodded. Jason folded the map and tucked it into his vest. "Then that's where I'm going next." Whatever waited beyond that border, Jason was ready. Betrayal had turned his grief into fury, and now someone was going to answer for it. The trail into the blind side wasn't on any map Jason had seen before. The area was unmarked, unnamed, avoided by locals and guides alike. Even Luis, hardened by years in the jungle, approached it with caution. The air felt different, still, almost hollow. No animal calls, no insects buzzing, only the crunch of boots over dead leaves and the rustling of gear. Carla walked beside Jason, pistol ready at her side. They hadn't spoken much since the confrontation with Raphael. There was nothing left to say. Ahead was only the unknown, and it was time to face it. The deeper they went, the more. Jason's gut twisted. It wasn't just fear, it was proximity. He felt it. His family was close. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew. After 4 hours of silent trekking, they found it. The clearing was sudden, like someone had carved it violently out of the jungle. The trees stopped in a perfect circle, exposing bare soil and a crude wooden structure, half shack, half shelter. It looked abandoned but not old. Jason raised a hand, signaling everyone to stop. The air was heavy, and the silence felt loud. They crept forward, every step slow. Jason's heart pounded. At the entrance of the shack, a tarp flapped in the wind. He reached out, peeled it back, and froze. Inside, the space was dark, but his eyes adjusted quickly. Torn clothing hung from nails. A red backpack lay open in the corner. Emily's. Jason's legs buckled. Louise caught him by the arm, steadied him. She was here. Jason whispered, "This is it." They swept the room. Carla checked for traps, while Louise secured the perimeter. In the center of the floor, a hatch. Wooden, half covered by dirt, with a handle made from twisted wire. Jason dropped to his knees and pulled it. The door creaked open, revealing a ladder. Descending into blackness, a damp, earthy smell rushed upward. Sweat, mildew, something else. Jason looked at Carla. She nodded once. No hesitation. He started down, each rung groaning under his weight. The light from above faded quickly, and when he reached the bottom, all he could see was the faint reflection of something metallic. He flicked on his flashlight. The beam landed on shelves lined with empty bottles, a cot with stained sheets, and a notebook. Emily's notebook. Jason grabbed it, flipped through the pages. Her handwriting was there, uneven, frantic. Notes about plants, names, time. Stamps, drawings, then the words, "Being watched, not alone, trust no one." His hands shook, then he heard it. A sound, soft, muffled, like a sob. He turned toward a dark corner and raised the light. A figure moved slowly, cautiously, then a voice, hoarse and low. "Jason?" He stumbled forward. "Emily?" She stepped into the light, face gaunt, eyes wide. She looked broken but alive. Behind her, another shadow, Lily, her face dirty, hair tangled, but unmistakable. Jason collapsed to his knees as they rushed into his arms. For the first time in weeks, he let himself cry. Emily clung to him, trembling. "I didn't think you'd find us," she whispered. Jason held her tighter. "I told you I would." Lily pressed into his chest, silent, shaking. It was real. They were alive. But the moment was cut short by the sound of movement above. Louise's voice called out, strained, "We're not alone." Jason pushed Emily and Lily behind a stack of crates. Carla appeared at the top of the ladder, gun drawn. Jason climbed back up, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. Outside, figures emerged from the trees, 3 of them. All wore dark clothes, faces obscured by scarves. One stepped forward. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly. Jason stepped into the open. "They're alive. I'm taking them back." The man tilted his head. "Then you know too much." He raised a weapon. Carla fired first. The man dropped instantly. Chaos erupted. Louise tackled the second figure. Jason grabbed the gun from the fallen attacker and took cover. Bullets cracked through the air. The jungle, so silent before, now roared with violence. Jason crawled toward the shack, yelling for Emily and Lily to stay down. Louise and Carla moved like soldiers, focused, efficient. In seconds, it was over. 2 attackers down. 1 fled into the trees. Jason's hands were shaking, but his family was safe for now. They packed fast. No time for mourning, no time for questions. They burned the shelter. Jason watched the flames consume the space where his family had been held. Emily limped slightly, Lily too weak to walk far. Louise fashioned a stretcher from branches. Carla checked the perimeter every few steps. They had to move fast. They didn't know if reinforcements would come. Jason held Emily's hand the entire way back, saying nothing. Every second mattered, every sound could mean danger. But through it all, one thing gave him strength. He had them back. Somehow, against every odd, he had pulled them out. The journey back was long and brutal. They traveled through the night. At sunrise, they reached a safe zone where Daniel's team waited with vehicles and supplies. When Jason laid eyes on civilization again, he felt his knees give, but Emily was still holding his hand. Lily had her head on his shoulder. Carla stood watch, silent, scanning the trees. Jason turned to her. "Thank you." She gave a small nod. "It's not over," she said. Jason knew she was right, but for now the mission was complete. His family was alive. The lies were exposed, and somewhere in the jungle, someone else was running scared for the first time. The hospital room was small, clean, quiet. Outside, the hum of the city returned, a strange contrast to the absolute silence of the jungle. Jason sat in a chair beside Emily's bed, holding her hand. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear now, strong. She hadn't spoken much since the rescue. Neither had Lily, who slept curled up in a chair across the room, arms wrapped around a stuffed animal someone had given her. Doctors said they were lucky, dehydrated, weak, shaken, but alive. Jason didn't care about the medical terms. All that mattered was that they were here, breathing, whole. The nightmare was behind them, or at least most of it. Emily finally spoke that evening, just a whisper at first, barely audible over the sound of the IV drip. "I carved the tree." Jason leaned in. "I know." Her fingers tightened around his. "I didn't think you'd find it, but I had to try." Jason nodded slowly. "You did more than try. You left a trail. You saved both of you." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Jason wanted to ask 100 things, what happened in the clearing, who the woman was, how they survived, but he didn't. Not then. She wasn't ready. And neither was he. Some answers could wait. Lily stirred in her sleep. Jason stood, walked over, and brushed a hand over her forehead. She didn't wake. She looked younger somehow, smaller, fragile in a way she never had before. He thought about all the things she'd seen, things no child should ever endure. He wondered how she would carry this, how it would shape her, but he also knew something else. She was her mother's daughter, and Emily had fought like hell to keep her alive. Whatever darkness had touched them, it hadn't destroyed them. It had marked them, yes, but not broken them. Later, that night, Jason stepped into the hallway. Carla stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the lights of the city. She hadn't left since they arrived. When Jason approached, she didn't turn. "They'll try to erase it all," she said. "The people behind it. They'll deny it, clean it up." Jason nodded. "Let them try." Carla finally looked at him. "Are you going to stay quiet?" Jason shook his head. "No, I'm going to talk. I'm going to tell everyone what happened." Carla smiled for the first time. "Good. Then maybe they'll stop watching. Maybe they'll run." In the days that followed, Jason gave his statement to international investigators. Carla shared her files, the footage from the camera, the photos, the journal, all compiled and sent to multiple agencies. News stations picked up the story. Articles ran with titles like "Family Found Alive After 9 Weeks in Jungle Prison" and "Dark. Secrets of the Amazon. Who is the woman known as the Observer?" It wasn't complete justice. No arrests, no names, but it was a crack in the silence, a signal flare. Jason knew it was only the beginning, but it was enough to make them nervous, enough to make them know they'd been seen. Emily and Lily were released from the hospital a week later. Jason carried his daughter out in his arms. Emily walked slowly beside them, her steps still uncertain but steady. Reporters stood at a distance, flashes going off. Jason shielded Lily's face and guided Emily to the waiting car. The ride back to the airport was quiet. Jason stared out the window, watching the jungle shrink in the distance. He didn't hate it. The forest wasn't the enemy. It had hidden horrors, yes, but it had also hidden the message, the carved coordinates, the letter J. It had protected the clue that saved his family. There was power in that. Back home, it took time to rebuild. Emily had nightmares. Lily spoke very little. Jason started therapy with both of them. Slowly, painfully, they stitched their lives back together. Emily began writing again, articles at first, then longer essays about survival, fear, and control. She never named names, but those who needed to understand did. Lily drew pictures of trees, rivers, and always a giant J at the base of a tree trunk. Jason framed one and placed it in their hallway. A symbol, a reminder, proof that love had carved its way through darkness. Months later, Jason returned to Brazil alone. He met Carla near the edge of the jungle where it all began. They didn't speak much, just exchanged a look, acknowledgement. She was still searching. He was done searching, but not done fighting. Before leaving, Jason walked to the riverbank and stood in the same spot, where Emily and Lily had boarded the boat. He stared at the current, at the endless green beyond it. Then he pulled a small knife from his pack and walked to the nearest tree. Quietly, carefully, he carved something into the bark, coordinates, and beneath it, the letter J. The story would never be over. Not really. There were still people out there hiding in the shadows of the jungle, still families waiting for answers. But Jason had brought his back, and that was more than most. As he flew home, he looked out the window at the jungle far below and whispered a final thank you to the tree, to the river, to Emily for believing, and to Lily for leaving a mark no one could ignore. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just carved a letter into the wood and waited. She knew they'd come. Hi, I'm Erlen, the host of Emotional Journey. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts below. And don't forget to share this video with someone who loves powerful, true, emotional stories. Thank you for watching. And remember, some stories are unforgettable,